Have you ever wondered what was out there in the night sky? Stared up at the stars in the hopes of seeing something out of the ordinary? Have you ever heard unexplainable noises coming from a vacant room, or watched a shadow cross the wall in front of you? Have you asked yourself if there's life after this one, or if you had life before? What about strange creatures that are mythical and elusive? Have you experienced deja vu, or felt a prompting to leave because you felt you were in danger? What if tomorrow you were on the fringe?
Welcome to another episode of On the Fringe. I'm Mark, and with us tonight are our permanent part-time co-hosts, Pam and Jessica.
Hello.
Bill was previously engaged tonight, so he will not be joining us. But before we get started, let's just start out with the basics. Please visit our website, whatiftomorrowmedia.com. And check us out and visit our partners, EMP Shield, My Patriot Supply, Duke Cannon, which is probably my favorite product on there. I use it every day. And I just had a brain fart, sorry. Conflicted the Game, which if you guys have been with us before where we've played it, we're probably going to have to play it again one of these days. It will really make you think. So anyway, for tonight's show, I almost forgot. If you don't want to visit our sponsors and still want to help us out, visit buymeacoffee.com/whatiftomorrow. Anything you decide that you want to share with us would be fantastic. Helps us pay for the show. I mean, it's not like we get paid for it or anything, but we just love doing it. It helps us put on the show, and we've got some plans to do some really fun things, so you can help us out with that. All right. Talking about tonight's show, we are going to talk about, did giants walk in ancient America? And I think you guys are probably going to have the same thought I did after this show. I think you're going to say yes. The little research I was able to do, I started reading a book. I'm about 10-15% into it, and I'm just gobsmacked by the evidence that has existed and no longer is available. So with that, you ladies want to get us rolling into that?
Sure. You want to go first, Pam, or you want me to go?
Oh, you can go.
Yes, Chris. I finally got my reference materials turned in.
Yay.
Yeah.
I got my homework turned in.
Says our reference materials will be pinned on our Facebook group. So check in there tonight. And
yeah.
Hi, Alicia. Hi, Tim.
So I'm going to start out tonight just to let everybody know the topic of giants is 1,000 times bigger than you would ever think. It was 1,000 times bigger than what I thought. Yeah, it was gigantic. I knew that there was a lot of evidence of giant skeletons being found in the US and all over the world, of course. But until I took this deep dive, I really didn't have any idea how many. I'm going to kind of reiterate what Mark said, but change it a little bit. I don't think tonight is going to be so much about are there giants or were there giants in the continental US? It's going to be what kind of giants were in the US, because everything is saying that there was, and I can't find anything that says that there wasn't.
Except for the Smithsonian.
Yeah. So with that in mind, we're going to travel back just a little bit, and I'm going to start out with the Indian tribes that were indigenous to the to North America at the time. Nearly every one of them has a giant tail in it. The only ones I found that did not were the ones that were local more to the Rockies, the Rockies area. Um, but that tends to be a slow zone for anything, just because it's simply just not as populated in that area.
That makes
Before I
sense.
begin, I'm going to give a blanket apology to all the tribes of the continental US, because tonight I'm going to massacre all of your old place names and names of your mythologies and legends. So I'm giving that pre-apology. So please don't get mad at me.
Oh, I butcher the English language every time we have a
Blanket
show.
apology for all of us because
Yes.
Yes.
So please
Um,
accept this apology, no matter what your ethnicity, as I butcher your names and your places.
yeah.
for sure. Me too.
Give me just 1 second here. I'll be right back.
All right. While she's taking care of that, 1,000. We talked about 1,000 times. That's an interesting number because I have found over 1,000 accounts of giant skeletons being found in just the United States area, not just
Yes.
North America. So 1,000 is a very interesting number.
Yeah. My apologies. I had to let somebody in the door. Anywho's, yes, I am going to say this. I did try. I spent a good portion of this week up looking up each one of these Indian names and trying to find the correct pronunciation for them. So
Nice.
I have that behind me.
Yay.
I am nearly half Blackfoot. So for all of you, just so you know that. So togetherness. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to start out with the tribe that has the most, and that would be the Cherokee. Shocker. The Cherokee seem to have everything. So this one was a really interesting
book.
Yes. Yes, that's a very good book. If you guys are interested in that, it'll be in the reference materials. Take a look. They have fascinating stuff in there. This Cherokee story involves a giant called, let me say it, Jula Kalu. Starts with a T, so give me props on that one. This tale was supposed to was originally the oldest from the oldest tribe of the Cherokee, that a band of giants came to visit them. So basically, they were just set up shop somewhere, and the tribe of giants came to them. They said they were nearly twice as tall as a common man, and their eyes were slanted. So this is the first kind of race of giants that I'm going to touch on. There was an entire grouping of giants that had slanted eyes, and some of them even had, and it's a little freaky, but the smaller chin, so it would almost give them like an alien type appearance, right? Yeah, they actually called them the Jula Kalu, which means slant-eyed people. The giants told them that they lived very far away in the direction where the sun goes down. They stayed with the Cherokee for a time and then headed home to the west. Right? So that's not the end of that. They have many more stories that go with this. These giants contacted other tribes of the Cherokee and were kind of among them for a little while. So there's also a tale, and this one is almost like a morality tale too, but it talks about a giant that came down out of those mountains and basically wooed a girl, tried to woo her mother with free wood and food, basically, but she wasn't having it. He came to sweep her off her feet and say, come back up to the mountains with me, and we'll have a kid and woo and all this. And the mom wasn't having it. So he came in the middle of the night and stole her, basically. and took her up to the mountain. The interesting thing that I found is they spent an entire section explaining how big he was, down to the T. So in it, they described that the mother had come into her daughter's room and the giant was in there, but he filled it. And it said he was lying doubled up on the floor with his head against the rafters in the left-hand corner at the back, and his toes scraping the roof in the right-hand corner by the door. So that's how big this dude was supposed to be. Right?
He was ginormous for sure.
Well, the largest giant skeleton reported was 18 feet.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be probably about right.
Yeah. So I also found the same story over in the North Carolina area, which is actually where the Cherokees kind of started. They progressed over into the Kentucky, Ohio River Valley, and then across the Mississippi later on. And especially with the Trail of Tears is when they came across there. But they originated in this area. And they actually have entire places in the Carolinas named after these giants.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot pronounce the name of this place, but it's a 100-acre area on the side of a mountain called Tennessee Bald in Jackson County, North Carolina. And it said that the giant cleared that spot off for his residence. It's completely bald right there for no reason at all. Another interesting thing is just a little ways down from there off the side of that mountain is a giant flat rock that has giant footprints on it alongside deer prints. Sadly, it's not there anymore. The railroad destroyed it when they came through. They ripped it out. But it had a name, and basically it meant where the giant put his hand. The story is that the giant would leap off of his mountain home and jump down, and that's where he put his feet and his hands before he bounced back off again to move on his way. It's like where he leapt down at. So I thought it was really interesting that story kind of spans where the Cherokee went.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the story could have just traveled with him and it might just be a myth, but I just thought it was super interesting that where they ended up was where a lot of the giant skeletons are found.
It is, and it's
see.
really, yeah, and it's really sad that piece of history is gone because it's really cool.
Yeah,
I've actually got a map pulled up that shows where a lot of these skeletons have been found, and there is a lot when you go east.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And especially up close, closer to the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
So.
There's actually one more stone. There's a soapstone boulder covered in petroglyphs, and it contains a giant 6-fingered handprint associated with that same story, just a little ways away from there too. So there's even more evidence that something was going on with the giants there. It's just one handprint, but it's 6 fingers, which you'll find a lot with some of these skeletons.
Yes. And that
Well,
that has
you really find 6 fingers when we're talking about Nephilim.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
that seems to
and
be
we will
a
get to
Nephilim
that
thing.
too. Yeah. So they also have another giant that was intermingled with the group, and he's called Stoneclad. He is also of the Iroquois legends.
Mm-hmm.
So he bounced back and forth between the two of them, which doesn't make sense because the Cherokee and the Iroquois were not friendlies. So just for the fact that they both share something very similar is interesting. Let me see if I can pronounce it. Stoneclad's name was Nunyo Nui. And each story is a little different. One story is there was an entire race of them, and another story was there was only one. But basically, they had stone-like skin or stone armor. They couldn't tell. No one could ever get close enough to them because they were cannibals. Another
Trolls.
thing that most of these giants tend to be shown as is they were cannibals. The Indians didn't dare get near them because they were going to get eaten. Apparently, Indians are tasty. So
I'm gonna say I wouldn't get near
Who
them
knew?
either. They were going to eat me.
So the Iroquois also had another group. They had the stone clads, but they also had the stone coats. It's very similar, but a little bit different. This was an entire race of giants, twice as tall as humans, with rock hard scales that repelled all their weapons. They were cannibals and were considered to be a tribe of primordial man eating monsters. So basically, the Iroquois are saying they were here long, long, long before we were.
Mhm.
Uh,
Which is what I ran across too. was
yeah.
the-
Yeah.
yeah.
They have a couple more tales of the stone coat. So they do have a tale, and you can look it up. It's called Skundy Wundy, and it's the name of a man who outwitted one of the stone coats. He actually dared to go into their village. So I don't know if he was brave or stupid, but that will also be in my research.
Apparently, he
references.
wasn't very
Take a
tasty.
look. Interesting to note with the Iroquois, and you'll find this with a lot of the Indian tribes too, especially the ones that denote somewhere in their history giants or a giant. One of their mythos origin stories comes with a giant in it. They had Gaio, who is a giant who lives in the northern skies, and he's the one that controls the winds. So just a little side note.
Okay.
So
All right.
the giants were big enough in their culture that they actually denoted one of them to their mythos. So interesting. We're going to move on to Navajo. They were very big into the giants too, and still are. Actually, it's still a very large part of their community. Oral history includes an entire era when great giants that were foreign gods, take note of that, infesting the earth. They had myth of twins who were tasked to be monster killers. It's in their, gosh, it's deep in their legends. They were brothers, they were twins, and they were charged with taking out the monsters who were there to kill the people of the Navajo. The first twin's name is, I'm going to slaughter this, Neyi Nezgani. And his name means, check this out, the slayer of the alien gods.
The slayer of the alien gods. Interesting.
Alien gods in Navajo. Yes. In Navajo culture, the giants are foreign. They're not from our planet. They've come down. They are gods, but not the Navajo's gods. And these two twins were born with the task of taking care of these for the people of the Navajo.
Interesting.
That's interesting.
It is. Yeah. So the Navajo also have another kind of giants. These are called the I think it's Starnaki people. It's a regal race of white giants. So we're going to start getting into the white giants. Now, that doesn't mean the giants in the other stories were not white, but they're not mentioned within the legends. So I would think if that
Right.
was an important part, that would be there. And listen, this one has got me excited. It's a regal race of white giants that had great mining technologies, who dominated the West. They enslaved lesser tribes and had strongholds all throughout the Americas. They were sad to have left to go back to the heavens when they were finished. Now, the interesting thing is this is not the only tribe with this story. There's a good handful of other tribes pockmarked all across the U.S. and mostly down in South America that talks about the same group of white giants who came in and mined tons and tons of ore of all different kinds. And when they were done, they went back up to the heavens and took it all with them.
Interesting.
That checks. I mean, if I was going to visit a planet, it would probably be for resources.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
And it also
despite what
kind
you
of
think of
lends to
these
what
stories, there's evidence of giant people.
Mm-hmm.
It also kind of lends, you remember last week when we were talking about, like out of place artifacts and all that craziness, and Pam really talking about them coming in and taking minerals and ores that can only be found in the Americas.
Yep.
But they're not found with any of the tribes around here. So we know that they were not the ones that were mining it.
Right.
Where did it go?
And
We
there,
know some of it went overseas.
A lot of it has been chemically proven to come from these mines up north, to have ended up in the Near East.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And as far east as India.
There's quite a few giant skeletons that are found in the area where that those particular mines, I think they're in Michigan, the copper mines were found, where the majority of it's mined out, but there's a scant amount of that particular copper within the North American tracts that have been found.
Now, when we're talking, keep in mind for you, our viewers and our listeners, what we're calling giants for the most part are between 7 and 8 feet, some 9-footers. And there is a single or maybe two outliers that were supposedly 18 feet or taller. Even if you throw those out, the outliers, they're still big people. I mean, we've got people that big today. We're talking of big people, and we're talking finding 1,000 skeletons in this range.
Yeah.
Over the last,
just to put this out there, so I'm not giving any kind of heights yet, because these are literally just old legends and stories and mythos belonging to these Indian tribes. I'll move on, and so will Pam, to actual accredited stories that have heights in it. I'm just going to say right now, and I don't know what Pam has done, but I did not write down any stories where they were less than 7.5 feet.
No, I didn't either.
Because to me, I mean, while 7 feet is very, very tall for us, it's still conceivable that someone could be that big. And there were very tall tribes. The Osage tribe, which is from our area, were known for how tall they were. They were a very tall tribe of people. So I made sure to cut out that, that little iffiness that you might have hearing these stories on whether or not it could have just been a really tall person. So,
all right.
That being said, yeah. So we're going to move on to the Choctaw. The Choctaw have a very interesting story. Now, the Choctaw is another group that moved into the Ohio River Valley area. They moved into the state of Tennessee, or what is now Tennessee. It was not Tennessee, of course, back then. But they had years and years and years of trouble with this group that they ran into there called the Nuhulo. And the Nuhulo were a race of giants that were inhabiting the whole central part of this area. They were said to be huge of stature and all white of color, which you're going to find all of the giants in the Ohio River Valley area are all white, bearded, either red-haired or blonde-haired. Just to let everybody know.
Also, within a large cave area.
So the Choctaw, of course, came into contact with them when they first crossed the Mississippi River. They were said to be cannibals. Here we go again. That the Choctaw actually killed when possible. The Choctaw were actually a pretty big warring tribe. A lot of warriors in it. They weren't the quieter tribes like the Iroquois and stuff. Well, actually, the Iroquois were pretty nasty themselves, but for different things. They actually spent their time warring with this group and picking them off one by one until they got rid of them all. And in that area of Tennessee is where you find a good amount of mounds. And those mounds are supposedly left over from those giants. They belong to the giants. In fact, if you ask just about any Indian tribe, the majority of the mounds and the ruins left in the Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama area are from the giants. They're not from them. They'll often say,
correct me if I'm wrong. A good percentage of these giant skeletons were found in mounds.
yes, yeah, it's because that's how they buried their dead too.
Yeah, the majority
Yeah.
of them were for sure.
Okay.
Wasn't there a
Mhm.
similar story with the red-haired giants? Was it in Utah? Where they fought them down to extinction, basically.
Yeah, it's looking the majority of these stories, except for the ones where they said they left off on their own up to the heavens or just took out on their own because they were tired of living there. Most of them were wiped out. And I have a couple of stories here where they've actually found mass burials of these giants. So
Would that be the bog people in Florida?
Now there are some of the bog people
Or were
in Florida.
I don't know
Very
how
large.
big they were. I know they found a bunch of bodies with red hair in a bog.
More
Yeah,
than one.
those
Bog mummies.
Yeah, those weren't giants, I believe. I believe they think I can't remember what that was. They weren't the giants though. It was something different. I actually looked
Okay.
at that when we were doing some of the other out of place artifact stuff. And
Okay.
it's something we probably bring up later on.
I ran across that too in regards to giants, though. Was that in the giant book, Mark?
It might have been, yes.
If
That's
you
why.
saw it,
Am I wrong? Well, if I'm
I
wrong,
don't know
find
what
out.
their stature was. I just know that there was a
I've
bunch
only
of
got
redheaded
like 5
bodies.
billion tabs here, so let me flip through it real quick.
That is a good
ahead,
book. The
Taco.
book she's
Yeah,
going through,
All right.
folks, is called The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America.
It's great.
I am not as far through it as she is. It is an amazing book.
It is really good.
It's well put together and well researched.
Tons and tons and tons of newspaper articles in here on giants and thing. I'm just going to look up Florida bog. You can go ahead and talk, Jeff.
All right.
Sorry.
I'm going to continue. So still with the Choctaw. So they have this very long history with them. It's a big part of their culture. Another reason why I think this was not just a made up moral story taught to children to scare them out of the mountains or to teach them a lesson. It really was a part of their living situation at the time, I believe. Another thing related to Choctaw, and I'm going to put this out there. This is a little controversial, but I thought there was enough reason to kind of include it a little bit. Everybody may know the name Champ, which many people kind of think of as a Bigfoot legend. It is a Choctaw legend. It's also actually pronounced Champay in the Choctaw language. But it was said to be a cannibal giant that actually preferred to steal the Choctaw women.
Really?
It has been mixed in with some Bigfoot legend, but I don't actually think they're one and the same. I think they were accidentally just kind of thrown together. He was never called Harry. He was called Smelly, but he was a giant. So I think because it said that he was smelly, they've mixed it in with a Bigfoot legend. Bigfoot is very big in that area too. So in my opinion, I think it's been mixed.
I work with a guy, so
you know. Do you work with Champay? Is he pretty big in
I mean,
smelly?
I'm wondering.
Okay, I found it. Let me jump in really quick with this.
You found it.
You know what it says?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested.
You are correct. They were not as tall, and I'm not sure why it's in the giant book here, but average height was between 5'6" and 6'2" of these bog people. But probably the most interesting thing about this was in over 90 of the bodies that they found, there was brain matter still in there.
Oh, yeah, because they were down in the bog. They were kind of
the bog mummies.
And what's really cool is even though they were in here for so long, to put it into perspective, these people had already been dead for 3,000 or 4,000 years before the first stones were laid in the Egyptian pyramids. That's how long they've been in those
Wow.
bogs. Yeah. But the oh, you said it earlier. I can't remember the acronym for the Native American Act that went
Oh,
in
the
the
yeah,
90s. Yeah. That can no longer be messed with because of that.
exactly.
But yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
they're redheaded. Is this proof that Europeans were visiting America? You know, go back to the Atlantis thing. Europeans were
Yeah.
visiting America.
And honestly, I think that's what this author's gripe was with this particular set of mummies too, was the fact that they're redheaded. They appear to be from European descent, which means they shouldn't be protected under the Native American Act. But you
Yeah.
know, who's he to argue with anybody?
Well, actually, and I'm going to cover this later. I went back and found the original, and I'm just going to say it because he's long since dead. And if there's any family left, they can suck it. This douchebag, what this douchebag did when they got the Smithsonian rolling, he basically, and I'll reiterate this later and kind of go over it in better detail. But basically, he said anything that came out of the ground or is in rock art before Columbus sailed over here is worthless. And the
Yep.
Smithsonian still holds on to that. That's part of their little mantra.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that is found that comes up out of the ground in the continental US before the time that Columbus sailed is automatically American Indian and
Yes.
goes back to whichever tribe is the nearest.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter if that
Unspoken and
tribe
asked.
was there to begin with, or from when the remains were brought forth from, or even the artifacts. It goes to whoever's nearby.
That's
And
right.
that's crazy.
It's a travesty. I mean, I know that some of the tribes had their best things at heart. They were trying to do what was right, but it was taken. It was done very poorly, and it was not thought out. So,
Yeah,
just gonna put that out there.
This guy wrote, hence
And
it
on
will be
top
seen
of-
that it is illegitimate to use any pictographic matter of a date anterior to the discovery of the continent by Columbus for historic purposes.
Yeah. Well,
He
I
also
have
goes on
all of
to
that
say-
down. So
Yes, it says he goes on definitively to state that there are no foreign influences to be seen or studied in relation to the Pueblo mound building cultures of the Americas that are believed to precede the American Indians. In relation to his dismissive comments regarding any of the connections to the lost tribes from the Old World, it's interesting to note that Powell was the son of a preacher in Palmyra, New York, who lost his flock to Mormon missionaries. So he had
Axe to grind.
he had an axe to grind. That's a very good
he had
way
an
to put it.
agenda,
He did. He had a
basically.
huge agenda.
And
we
will. We'll go.
unfortunately-
We're gonna have a whole little section on that coming up here in a little bit because I got an axe to grind too. I'm gonna lay waste to that little sucker and some other people too. Anywho's, moving on. So, we're coming down to the end of where I'm going to be talking about American Indian lore and legends because we would be here. This would be like this would be a 2-part show just for those. So I'm not going to do that. I kind of wrote down the pertinent ones and we'll kind of go over real quick the rest of the tribes, but we won't go over their legends because it's too much. Yeah. So I'm going to move on to the Comanches. And the Comanches called these their white giants. They have called them the white giants for so long. I can't find the original name for them. They called them that for so long that it turned into English for them. Do you understand? It's part of their mythos so much that they've kind of lost, I think, the old name for it. So, yeah. And this was recorded to still be going on in 1857.
Oh, wow.
This is why I thought this was so interesting, right? This is when the story was taken down as if it was still kind of a thing. So a large community of white giants, 10 feet tall, who live in fortifications at the top of summits of the mountains and lower valleys. They were said to live in rock-built homes, had buildings and sidewalks and stone walkways and were well more advanced than any other Indian nation. They were cunning at handicraft, were brave and warlike, and ruled over the land that they took from its ancient possessors. They were suddenly taken back into the sky. So this supposedly happened in 1857. The mounds and fallen structures are all that's left of this mighty city. Yeah, if anybody actually wants to read this full account, you can. I found it. The full account is in a book called 3 Years Among the Comanches by Nelson Lee from 1859. And I did find it. You can find it for free on a lot of places on the internet. Just go to Google Books or just type in the name of it and, like free reading. You'll find it all over the place. It was super interesting. It's such a part of their community. Like, this was a Comanche thing. They knew about these. And to me, it sounds like the Atlanteans.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like Atlantis. Kind of crazy.
It is.
So, yeah. So moving on, I'm just gonna make out a quick list here of other Indian tribes that have giants as part of their mythos. So we've got the Yupiks, the Alces, the Northeast Coast, the Apache, the Caddo, the Micmac, the Hopi, the Algonquin, the Wabanaki, the Creek, the Chickasaw, the Wampanoag, the Lenape, the Nagaseti, the Anishinaabe, and the Cree.
Oh, wow.
And that's what I'd found so far. Like I said, we can't go into all of them, but you are more than welcome to look them up. I put in access to some of those tribal stories in my research that Chris is going to post. So if anybody's kind of interested, you can also quite easily just go online and type in giants and Indian tribes, and it will give you all sorts of pages full of lists of original names and things like that.
Things.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm going to move on from that. Did you want to put something in, Pam? Do you want to start on some of your research? Pam's a little flustered today. She doesn't have her stuff.
I have all my information, and it is not, I didn't have the time I thought I would have today to get it in order. So I'm just kind of letting Jess run with it and interjecting here and there.
Okay. Do you want me to keep rolling, or do you have something you want to put in, or?
No, you can keep going. I do. I know we're just working on North America right now, but there is this one that I thought was really fascinating. Just quick, out of the British Isles. They actually discovered some stone tools in Norfolk, England, which apparently were wielded by prehistoric giants. And the reason I thought this was interesting, because there's actually a picture with it. Look at the size of that man's hand in regards to those tools.
Those are crazy.
Those are crazy. And I know it's not in, but, pretty cool. They're all over the world. And, I have lists from the U.S. too. But Jess, you're doing a fabulous job hitting them. So I will roll with what you're doing.
Okay. I think Mark is frozen.
Oh, no.
Yeah. That's okay. I'm just going to roll with it here.
Okay.
So moving on. So I'm just going to follow the Indian trail. So a good portion of the Indians came up into the Ohio River Valley. And I know I keep touching back on this, but I can't stress enough how important this area is to not only the Indian tribes of the area, but all of these peoples coming in and out of the nation that early were going right up the Mississippi, and the Mississippi feeds right up into the Ohio River Valley. And it was plush and green, and it had tons of minerals, and it had game, and it's where you wanted to go. And if you watched our show last week, you'll know why up the Arkansas was not the way to go. No. Killed many, many elephants and other things.
Yeah.
Right?
Apparently they were tasty, though, apparently.
Yeah. Killed some Egyptians. Don't want to take the Arkansas. Okay?
No, It was rough.
We're going to go like stay in Tulsa. Don't go any further. Because then you're
There's been hillbillies along the Arkansas since before there was hillbillies.
Anywho, so reiterating, yes, this is a very important area, and it's very important historically wise, especially to what we're going to go through now. This kind of took me on Mr. Toad's wild ride. So I'm going to take y'all with me. So we're going to talk about the white giants of primitive Kentucky. Okay. And I'm just going to start reading a little bit verbatim from my notes because it's a lot. And it's kind of hard to get across what I'm meaning if I'm trying to sit here and just float it off the top of my head. So many tribes made witness to a race of giant Caucasians in Kentucky. Many would not go into a large area of Kentucky except to hunt. Kentucky means the river of blood in 2 different Indian languages. Just to let you know, this is what they named this. I mean, before it was the state of Kentucky, when it was literally just a big area that people were coming into before they hit the Mississippi. They would not hunt there usually. Some of them would hunt, but not very far within its borders. They wouldn't travel across it. They wouldn't bury their dead there. They wouldn't live there. And they called it the River of Blood. It was considered a land of ill repute. And wherever a lodge fire blazed, strange and unholy rumors were busy, is what they said. So if you saw a fire blazing in there, you really didn't go in. Indian traditions account a great war against the white tribe, ending in their extermination. It's such a pertinent part of local Indian history that the tribes were in awe that white settlers who came in later had the gall to live where their giant forebears had died and now haunted. So that was the story going around with the tribes when our white settlers started coming in to kind of settle the area. They were like, what's up with these MFers? Aren't they scared to death? Because it's haunted with all them giant whites that were just here that we took care of. What are they doing here? Yeah, crazy. It's a part of it. All of the Indian tribes of the Ohio River Valley have this story. Like, check out these idiots.
Well, I mean, I've looked in a mirror. I might resemble that.
So I actually found this really fantastic firsthand story of a curse that followed one of these giant tribes, or the giant tribe caused it, I should say. Have you all ever heard of the curse of yellow hair? No? Okay. It's one of the biggest things in the Ohio River Valley, and this curse was still active until just a few years ago when the last of the line died. Not of the giants, but of the white people that they cursed.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, this is a fun one. So they say that the banks of the Ohio are fertilized with their bones. There are 2 cemeteries. One that had just common giants in it, which means they were smaller of stature. They said they're of medium stature, so they were still tall giants, but not the huge ones, right? And then 50 tombs of the ruling class giants, the big ones. And they were actually buried in stone, kind of like a sarcophagus or a tomb, all with a smash to the skull on their left sides. So they were all lined up and killed with a bash to the head. All are men, and all are buried in the sitting position with their faces pointed towards the rising sun and weapons in their laps. Some of them have been opened and examined. They've got write-ups on it or whatever. One was a special burial of a man over 7 feet tall. It was believed to be Yellow Hair, who was the white colony's chief. Although they called him a king. You're going to find that a lot in these giant tribes. They called their leaders a king. The Shawnee chief, Hawkwing, sent members to ask Yellow Hair to share his fisheries and hunting grounds when they arrived into the area. or else they would massacre the white tribe. Yellow hair refused, so the Shawnee came over and wiped them out. Shawnee had way more men, and I don't think they had too many of these giants left. They were already a very old group by then. Yellow hair was said to have cursed the Shawnee and the land it was on before he died. And to this day, everyone who has owned that land and all of the descendants of Hawkwing have died in odd and untimely ways. And it's true. I went back and kind of looked at the descendants, and it's absolutely true. And in fact, they think that the curse just ended a couple of years ago. The last two living descendants of Hawkwing were a grandma and her grandson. Her grandson was very depressed, went nutso, and did a double suicide. Shot her, or murder-suicide, killed her, shot himself.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And everybody who's owned the property that the two cemeteries sit on have never owned it for more than a few years at a time, or if they've owned it for a very long time, they start losing people in their family too. So it gets shuffled along pretty quick.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if the curse is done because the grandma and the grandson died, or if it's going to continue stuck to the land. I don't know.
Big Willie
saying?
Wants to know if thoughts of us being truly manufactured, at least on a genetic level, meaning the old legends that are in every ancient civilization about the gods versus the giants was true. And then we were created or edited genetically to be inferior to what the giants were, but still built somewhat in their image.
Interesting.
And he says, I mean, think about it. The first woolly mammoth is going to be grown and birthed next year. I think they have a goal of 180 something thousand by 2050.
Wow.
That's nuts.
I know they're supposed to be working on the dodo right now too.
Yeah, I think they should leave well enough alone.
It's who knows, Willie? It's very possible. I mean,
anything's possible, man.
Anything's possible, but you know, it kind of if you look at all the different types of things, like there's the thought that, you know, we evolved from apes and on, but is that really true? I mean, and if so, did we have our start in a specific area? I think, was it the Anunnakis, where the thought is that possibly they messed with our genetics and made us more than what we were at the time they found us. So basically they made a slave tribe out of us at that time, to do their bidding here on Earth, for what they needed, just for their benefit. But at the same time, it helped us evolve as a species. And that's just one that's just one thought that's out there. Is it true? I don't know. But
well, that would make sense, because they can't find the missing link.
No, they haven't.
If it's genetic modification, they wouldn't.
But you know what else is interesting is some of the things that I ran across. I think it was might have been in Utah, where they found a couple of giant skeletons that are down in rock. They were completely encased in rock. Just the very top of the bone was showing out. And they had to actually grind the rock away to get to it, which means that these things have been down there for like 2 million years, 3 million years, something like that, way beyond what they thought the length of the life of a Homo sapien is, which is what we are. So if we did evolve, what was an absolute Homo sapien of the same structure doing that far back, when according to everything that we know from evolution, that wouldn't be possible. But it is. We're looking at it. So
yeah.
Well, we're finding out all the time that the things that we have believed and been taught might not be so carved in stone as academia would want us to believe.
Well, and it's so sad because it's such a loss to just our country, let alone the entire world, to just not look at these things or go ahead with the thought that there could be something prior to where we stand right now, in scientific thought of, well, we only have evidence going this far back. That's not true anymore. But they're not moving beyond that original thought process because of the people that it might affect.
Because
the papers that it's going to disprove, the
right,
all these, just for, what is the word I'm looking for? Man, I am struggling tonight, guys.
egos.
Yeah, for the egos. That's it. That's the word.
Yeah.
Just for the egos.
Science
Terrible.
should be about having an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. They want to say, oh, this is the only way. That's not how science works. It's never worked that way.
Well, it's
Science
obvious
is about
we
having
haven't-
an open mind and looking for the truth.
It's obvious that we don't know everything, that we haven't discovered everything. We haven't even probably scratched 1% of 1% of what's actually the truth. And to stop just because we don't want to tread on anyone's toes, that's ridiculous.
We might hurt their little feelings.
Oh, whatever.
It is wrong.
Whatever. Okay,
All
sorry,
right.
Jeff. We just completely stole
No!
the line you were running on there.
I do not have to run this whole show. I'm just letting you know. You should. I'm going to move on to just basic skeletons they found everywhere. Do you have some, Pam, on hand that you'd like to do?
Actually, I have a few that is kind of interesting. It's more local to our
You're right,
area.
Alicia.
Yeah, that's great. Because I actually,
They
besides some in
don't,
the
Alicia.
Ozarks, I don't
Yes.
have a whole lot of
Okay.
locals because I spent so much time just the
Yeah,
outliers.
everywhere.
So hit it.
One of them that I ran across that I thought was kind of fun was there was a doctor. It goes into professionals that reported skeletal finds that were well over 7 feet tall or 7 feet in length. One of them was a Dr. Forrest Clements, who's the head of anthropology at the University of Oklahoma. He discovered over 6 skeletons that were over 7 foot tall, which is pretty exciting because that's in our backyard. And there's actually, let's see, Steelville, Missouri was a big one where they found 8-foot skeleton there in 1933. So this really wasn't that long ago.
No, not really.
And let's see here. Let me see if there's
100 years is not long.
No, it's not. And it talks about an ancient Ozark giant was dug up near Steelville. A strange discovery made by a boy looking for arrowheads, which is, that's usually those are the fun ones when they're just stumbled upon.
Yeah, actually,
they talked about.
Yeah, while you're showing that, if anybody's interested, the History Channel did a series a number of years back called, what is it called? The Giants of
Lost Giants? Is that what it was?
Yeah, the Lost Giants or whatever. The entire series is free on YouTube. It's a really fun series, and that particular episode is season 1, episode 2. And it's all in the Ozarks. So anybody that's close to us, you're going to have a hoot watching this because it's so close to where we are. It's kind of a fun episode. So you should check it out. Free on YouTube.
It is cool. Now, this does say the Steelville Ledger reported that the skeleton was packed up and shipped to the Smithsonian. Yes, exactly, Brian. They got shipped to the Smithsonian. Good grief. The Smithsonian. I give up. Smithsonian. Never to be heard of again. Shock, shock.
I don't feel bad about all the Indian names I got wrong.
No, I can't even say Smithsonian.
I can't even talk American.
It's terrible. It's horrible. It's terrible. And one that I was pretty excited about was Spiral Mounds has one, which is just north of Heavener, which we've talked about quite a bit, where the Heavener Runestone is. Spiro has the Spiral Mounds. There's been a lot of artifacts and things found there, but this just says, it's a very short line that says a similar mummified giant also turned up in Spiral Mounds, Oklahoma. It measured 8 foot 5 inches and was on display for a few months, where it was seen by several people before it mysteriously disappeared. So, gee, wonder where it's at.
I wonder.
Beaver Lake, Arkansas. Here's another one. They found a nearly 10-foot tall skeleton, 1913. And it has a picture with it as well.
Cool.
Big Willie says, "Show us the bones."
Right? Here they are. Search for the Lost Giants is the name of that show. It's actually on here. And the site of this cave was investigated. Bill Vieira is the guy. It had been flooded when damming and creating the Beaver Lake between 1960 and 1966. So you can't actually walk to this particular cave anymore, but it can be. Divers have gone down. They did dive down in there. They found the huge shelter cave believed to be the site of the skeletal finds. While a 70-foot stone wall was found at the entrance of the cave showing likely human habitation, no more clues were forthcoming, which is kind of a bummer. But they do at least know where it was.
Give us a little bit, Will. All right, give us a little bit, Brian. I've got them.
Yes.
I've got some pictures.
She does. Pretty cool. Bernard, Oklahoma. In 1819, an old lady saw a gigantic skeleton dug up by soldiers. Natives deemed it a god, and it was reburied by the direction of the padre.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Let's see. Let's see here. What is this one? A 13-foot example was the one from Bernard, was said to have been unearthed in Janesville, Wisconsin, too. And even bones that were estimated to be from a skeleton that was 14 foot tall at Etowah Mounds, which would be, that came out of the New York Times. I'm not exactly sure where that particular one was. But yeah, there's a lot. And these are just not even probably 5% of local stuff.
And no, Alicia says, doesn't everybody want to go dig up Round Mound now? And I was like, no, because I don't want to get cursed.
No, nobody wants a curse.
Crazy lady.
Curses be bad.
We've talked a lot, Alicia bringing that up. We've talked a lot about the mounds in the area, because there is Round Mound. There's also the mound that's over by Havana Lake. And then there's the Bartlesville Mound, where the water tower is out by the airport. If you take a really good look at that thing does not look natural. And there's been quite a few people that have discussed that too. So I'd be
maybe a future show.
And there were a lot of Indians in this area. And it's not that far to Ark City, where we know that there was a very large city.
Yes.
So
good point.
Well,
why not?
Of course, we're living on a huge Indian area. We're living in the exact point where the Osage Trail and the Hola Trail crossed.
Yeah,
true.
We're like the four corners of the Indian movement. So plumb full.
Yes.
It's
Speaking
like
of Indians,
big overpass.
Yeah. Speaking of Indians, I'm going to do one more Indian tribe, because I just found one more here that I had listed, and it's really interesting. So this one is in the Mississippi area, and this is another Choctaw, and I'm gonna call it a history, because it's in their history. It's not in a mythology or a made up story. When the Choctaw moved into the Mississippi area, they found a small race of giants living quietly, who were farmers. Okay, a little different.
I'm
Irish too.
I am too.
Yeah, Brian,
Irish-ish.
I'm not digging it up. I don't care how filthy I am.
I'm gonna send one of our Bigfoots after you. Anywho, moving on. The tribe told them. The tribe told them that they were all that was left of a great race of cannibals that had tamed the mammoths and had used them for work. They told them that their forebears used the mammoths to clear the great spaces to create the prairies in the area, which I looked into it, and it's very true. There was great forested areas like they were supposed to be, but there was these great prairie areas just hither and yon. So the story behind why those were suddenly there for no reason at all is because the giants in the areas had tamed the mammoths and they had them knock those areas down, so they had farming area.
Yeah.
They would
Kinda
make
neat.
a good workhorse for sure.
Slightly off topic. Did you see the article that said that they have found evidence that mammoths were still alive as recently as 5,000 years ago in Canada?
Wow.
I believe it. Well, a lot of
Yeah.
places in Canada are uninhabited.
Right.
So why wouldn't there be? There's a very good chance there's
Exactly.
a lot of animals in that area that we would think shouldn't be around anymore, but are.
This, speaking of that, there is a really cool thing in the book too that talks about indication of coexistence of giants with mastodons, and mastodons became extinct 12,000 years ago.
Yeah,
a
that's
long
true,
time.
Will. Will says there's all kinds of artwork indicating that mammoths were definitely being used when building in our history. And that is, it's absolutely true.
Well,
There's a
and
lot of artwork. And there's footprints that show that they were right here working beside men. So,
and elephants are still being used in some parts of the world today to clear land, to plow fields.
mhm.
So why not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if mammoths and mastodons were anything like elephants, they're actually, once you've domesticated one, quote unquote, they'll follow you for life as long as you treat them good.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the date on this. This is actually an article. It's called "The Two World Famous Mastodon Pipes Were Found." They were dug up in Iowa, which is really
Yeah.
cool. I mean, how would they know what they were if they weren't there?
Yeah, they were
Right.
totally there.
Mm-hmm.
Anywho, we should move on because we have a lot to cover. So I'm just going to I'm going to roll through some impressive skeletons that I found across the US and get through some of this so people can kind of get a grasp on what it is we're looking at. So I'm just going to start listing. A lot of these don't have stories with them. Some of them do. Iowa, 1875, Fremont County, east of Hamburg. They found a giant skeleton of 8 foot. New York, 1847, Cuyahoga County, Auburn, giant skeletons that were 8 feet tall. The Erie County giants from 1885, 150 giant skeletons. The Ashtula giants from Ohio, 1847, thousands of graves found containing skeletons so large that the skulls and jaws slipped easily over ordinary men's heads.
I
Yes.
ran across that quite a
Thousands.
bit.
I ran across that one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This one here I thought was very interesting. This one's called the Veach giant or the Augusta giant from this was actually found, I have the exact date. It was found March 17th, 1876 in Augusta, Kentucky. And I have a firsthand account. This one is so fun. You guys are gonna be so excited about this. This is a fun one. So the firsthand account came from this man named Jay Potter. 12 men and their dogs were out hunting on the property of S.K. Veach. Jay Potter, Captain Stephen Waits, John Harbison, Jay Wilson, L. Nodler, C. Coburn, B. Rankins, John Cablish, C.W. Taylor, Tom Allen, Henry Sisson, and Tacker Drake. They were out hunting with their dogs, and pretty soon they couldn't hear them anymore. They couldn't find their dogs. So they went looking for them. And the area where they thought the dogs should be, they were not. But they heard this weird rumbling sound coming from this elm tree. So they go towards this elm tree to figure out what's making this racket. And they find a giant hole at the base of the tree. And when they get their heads down in there, they realize they can hear their dogs. But the dogs sound like they're coming from like 100 yards away underneath a giant hill that was like to the side of them. It was starting to get dark. So they headed home and they came back in the morning when they had more light and realized that just beside that was this huge rock. And it looked like maybe the rock had partially slid away and had shown the opening finally. A large rock had been put there on purpose. So they managed to dig out from under the rock and get it to slide the rest of the way out of the way. And then they went to a nearby house and borrowed some candles and hauled butt into this cave, right? So they go in, they went in approximately 200 yards and came to a huge gallery room, perfectly square and about 80 foot each way and about 20 foot high. Their lights reflecting off of the surfaces were so shiny, they said it made it look like a magician's palace. So the walls were glassy smooth. Right? So that's not normal. They found a large crypt right in the middle of the room. They moved the topper off, and inside they found an immense skeleton measuring 11 feet 2 inches. It had a metal cap resembling copper, with various trinkets all around the head, and a sword that was 5 foot 3 inches in length. Could you imagine how tall you'd have to be to wield a sword over 5 feet tall?
That's crazy.
Yeah. The sword is in possession of W.T. Marshall at the Joe Donovan House and can be inspected by anyone so desiring. He said they were going to continue exploring, but after that, I couldn't find out any more information on it, except for a little blurb I found later on that said the skeleton was missing. Uh-huh.
Well, the ones that didn't get disappeared by the Smithsonian or returned or whatever are probably in private collections,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't say anything
Maybe.
about them because they don't want to get arrested.
Very
I
possible.
did find something very disconcerting, and I'm going to add this in here as my own research because it wasn't a part of this that I found. I was interested because at the end of the story, this dude was talking about the dude Veach who owned the property, who was in charge of the hunt for the day. He was super excited to they have found a cave on his property because back then you could make money off of showing caves to people. That was the trend right then, was the spelunking and going into caves. And he was like, I'm gonna make my money. I've got a cave and there's something cool in it. And the dude was dead within the year. Dude was not old. Now that's not saying he didn't die of something natural, but it just seemed a little
Suspicious?
suspicious. Didn't
For
have
sure.
any kids to pass that property on to, so who did it go to? Skeleton went missing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know if the sword is still around. It said it went to this dude's house for display, but it doesn't say what happened after that. If the dude still had it, it got passed down through his family. I don't know. Yeah.
It's hard to tell.
Yeah. So the next one I have is called the Holly Creek Giant. This is out of Holly Creek, Kentucky. And like I said before, we're going to hear a lot about Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama, because that is just the place ripe for them. So this one was found by a rancher under a large rock ledge while installing some cattle stalls. He was a rancher. He was building in the chutes and was using the rock wall overhang and stuff as kind of a side for a chute. Use what you got. The skeleton of a giant, 8 foot and 9 inches tall, abnormally long arms and large hands, while the feet were very small in comparison. The skull measured an amazing 30 inches in circumference. Now, just to give you all an idea of how large that is, that's just 6 inches shy of a full yard. Think about that.
Huge. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The most unusual feature, and this is the freaky part, check this out, was the facial structure. The eye and nose sockets were just slits rather than cavities. And the area where the jaw hinged at was solid bone. They have no idea how it ate or drank.
How strange.
Yeah. And it was very old. So there was no articles of clothing with it because that was all gone. And they didn't find anything else that would have stuck around, anything that was metal.
Well,
So
I wonder if
if you
lime deposits could have fused the bones together.
I don't know. I have no idea. But I just thought that was a little freakish. Plus, it had the slits for the nose and the eyes instead
That is
of
weird.
open cavities.
Yeah, that is strange.
And it seems like an adult-sized giant skeleton. So how did it exist for that long? You'd think something, maybe if it was a birth defect, that it would have died very quickly, not being able to take care of itself, or
you
and
would
if its
think
jaw was fused, how would it feed itself?
Yeah.
unless it was treated as a god and they took care of it,
Well,
fed it.
Yeah.
that wouldn't be that unusual,
Mhm.
historically speaking. Either
Yeah.
treated as a god or a demon,
Mhm.
depending on what society you were in.
Yeah. Now, there is one more interesting tidbit to this story, and I really don't know what to think about it. A lot of people use this as a way to say that it was a fake, but they noted that the body was found about 5 feet down, and they estimated at that soil level that it was buried only around 300 years previously. They said there wasn't a whole lot of that black soil that builds up around the bones when it's been there for a very long time. It leaches out and turns that soil black. It didn't have
Mhm.
that yet because it hadn't been there long enough.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
That's freaky.
Yeah. It
That
is.
is.
Yeah, it's crazy. They found a 9-foot giant. It's called the Cowan's Corner Giant in East Randolph, New York. The
There were
Montessori
a lot in New
skulls.
York.
Oh, yeah.
There was-
New York's another hotbed.
Yes.
Yeah. Montessori, Missouri, skulls of 3 prehistoric giants were found by a farmer 40 feet down. The immense size of the skulls indicate they were around 10 feet tall. That's one of the sets where the Smithsonian actually showed up unbidded, said, "Hey, we're really interested in your skeletons and we'd like to review them properly." And the dude was like, "Okay, well, here's the site. Let me know what happens." And he came back the next day and they were gone. And the
Of
Smithsonian
course
was
they were.
like, "What skeletons? We didn't send anybody out there."
Yeah, that makes me madder than anything when they just completely gaslight them. Oh, we don't know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. We have no idea. When
Oh,
they
yeah, and
proved darn
Mhm.
getting well, they did.
they're good at
Yeah.
Ugh,
it.
so frustrating.
Yeah. So Pam already talked about the Bernard Giant and the Ozark Goliath, which I had also.
Mhm.
And I'm going to move on to something that I think is just fantastic. So the red-haired giants of the Lovelock Cave, and this is right near Reno, Nevada. It's one of the most famous ones. And one of the reasons why it's one of the most famous ones is because they still have the skulls. It was mostly skulls that they found. They did find some bones, but it's mostly skulls that they have, and they do still have them. So a group of miners led by a man named James Hart found giant skulls with red hair. DNA tests proved that they were not Indian, but Caucasian. They were estimated to be about 8.5 feet tall and covered in a gum fabric, much like Egyptian mummies. So, as if someone had maybe tried to mummify them. They also had double row teeth. And the skulls are currently owned by the Humboldt Museum in Winnemucca, Nevada, but cannot be displayed because the state and the Smithsonian do not recognize their legitimacy. Now, we were all talking about this in the green room before we came on, but this was actually a good thing. The reason why they still have these skulls is because the state and the Smithsonian say they're not legitimate, and because they were not legitimate, they were not made to be given up in the NAGPRA.
You want to see
Native
something really
American-
cool?
What?
I think I have a picture of those skulls.
I
These
have
skulls
some
are-
too.
Do you?
Uh-huh.
At the
I
Humboldt
have a whole
Museum?
set.
It's probably this. Is it the same ones? Same
Yeah,
picture?
but I have it in color.
Oh, nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Trump.
So I'm gonna show these to you. I actually have a whole series of pictures that I'm gonna show just to kind of give some people a scope of what we're looking at. And I actually blew them up on my iPad so I could make them big. So if you will, let me get this straight. If you will look,
We suck at
that
technology.
the big red one in the middle, is one of the skulls. The ones beside it are not. It's going to give you an idea of how large these skulls are.
It is large.
It's huge.
Yes. So moving on, I have better pictures of it. Sorry about my bad technology here. So, I'm going to have to like get
Ring
rid
light.
of
There you go.
the ring light or turn it a little bit. So there he is in all of his glory. And I'm going to blow up his teeth so you can see it. They are double. You
That's
see them?
crazy.
Yep.
Weird.
Huh.
Now, the double teeth thing is actually very prevalent in the giant skeletons, especially up towards the coastal New York, Maine area. That's where the brunt of those are found. It seems as though there's races of these. There's also a race of them that have horns. Different, they call them horns, but they're basically bone protuberances in different parts of their head. And those are very common in the upper part of the Ohio River Valley and over towards California. Like there's a swath.
That almost sounds like giantism
Mm-hmm.
because they tend to have growths.
Yeah.
Here's another up close picture of those double rows.
You know what's fun? My great grandpa, he obviously was not a giant. He was tiny. He was like 5'4". He never lost his baby teeth. He had 2 pulled, and when those were pulled, the adult teeth came in. But other than that, up until he died in his 80s, he still had baby teeth. They were just worn down quite a bit.
I know a
Wow.
guy. I don't know if he's still alive. I know a guy who, when he was 40, had all his teeth pulled because they were rotten, and all his baby teeth came in. He had a brand new set of teeth.
That's freaky.
Wow.
How
He
cool
had
was that?
never
amazing.
lost a tooth in his entire life till they pulled him. Then all of his baby teeth came in, or all of his adult teeth came in.
That's crazy.
So
All
weird
right.
stuff like
So,
that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
You could
Well,
easily get a genetic group of people who that's common.
yeah, they were
Kind of
absolutely in
nice if
North
you keep
America.
replacing your teeth.
In
Yeah,
fact, I'm getting I'm getting ready to show you guys. So while we're on show and tell time, Graham
Good point, Brian.
Hancock, yeah, Graham Hancock and another lady, and I apologize to this lady, I've just forgotten her name. They compiled a map of all the known burials of giant skeletons that have been found in the continental US. And I've brought it with me because I don't think you guys can understand the scope of what we're dealing with until you see this map. And I will let you know there's a little over 800 on this map, and they've since then documented over 1,000. So it's growing. So I'm going to show this to y'all.
I've got that one if you want me to show it
You
on
see?
mine.
Yeah,
Sure.
show it on yours, Mark.
All right.
Because you need to see this. It's crazy.
Yeah. So while you're doing that, I have a couple other maps. I just wanted to kind of show.
There you go.
Okay, so while Mark has that up, I'm going to show you another map along with it. So I noticed that this map looked very similar to some other maps that we all use for our research in different subjects. And while this is a little off topic, it may not be off topic. Pam and Mark and I and the rest of our team have found that everything is connected to everything else in some fashion. And we can't ever get away from everything else that we've researched. It always loops back around, and it's done it already for us. You'd think that giants aren't really paranormal or supernatural, but here is, let me see if I can get it past there. This is the map of the missing 411. Does it look any similar
You know,
to
it kind of
the
does.
skeletons map? Here is the map of the cave systems in the US. Does it look kind of close to that map?
kind of
Right?
does.
We
Yeah.
need to
And
send
one
those.
more.
We need to send those to. Didn't you send those to me? I was going to send them to Mark so he could show them on the screen.
Yeah, they're on our group text. I have one more
Where's that?
map while Pam's looking for it. It was on our group text today.
Okay.
This map, let me see if I
There
can
it
get it pulled
is.
up here, is for Brian. This is all the Bigfoot. Notice any correlation?
So are the giants actually related to Bigfoot?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that everything has everything to do with the cave systems underneath the US.
It's a good place to hide.
Mark, I just emailed those to you.
Roger Dodger. Give me a sec.
Okay. I find it extremely interesting. I don't know if anybody else does.
If for no other reason, those seem to be areas of high strangeness, you know.
Exactly. I did look up a map of UFO sightings. Very unhelpful because you see UFOs everywhere except for the strip over the Rockies, and that's just solely because it's less populated. I'm
Yeah.
sure UFOs are probably just as popular there. We just aren't there to see them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
All right, I'm going to try to share that.
I'm going to give it a whirl there.
All right, can you see that?
There we go. So the bottom one is the cave systems, all the cave systems in the US, Mammoth Cave and all of that. And the one above it is the missing 411. So this is, I better put this out. This is David Paulides' map of all of the verified ones that he has mapped. And they almost all fall over the cave systems.
Mm-hmm.
That is
Which he
interesting.
thinks- Yes.
I wonder if anybody's pointed that out to him.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, because these are
Okay.
his maps.
Okay,
Yeah.
these are his maps. Okay.
Yeah.
These are his maps. That's why I'm saying his name out so we can give him a shout out where he deserves his due.
Yeah. And everybody, if you're interested in missing 411, visit the Can-Am. What is the name of his page?
Can-Am.
Can-Am.
Yeah.
Missing. He's on YouTube. Check him out. The stories are just
It's
outrageous.
really set up as a Bigfoot page, but his missing 411 stuff is on there too. It's like a secondary thing.
It's it's canammissing.com.
Canammissing.com.
CANAM missing.
And just a heads up for anybody who's listening or watching, his books are excellent. I suggest you get them. Do not get them off of Amazon. Go straight to that page and buy them from him. On Amazon, they'll cost you like $30, $45 a piece.
Or more.
From him, they cost you the normal price of a book. You'll pay like $14 or $15 for them. So.
And he gets the money.
Yes.
And he gets the money. Exactly.
So they're buying them from him and reselling them on Amazon at a profit.
Yeah. As if they're out of print. So wrong.
And they're not.
So wrong. Yeah, they're not. Okay. So progressing on, unless you have anything else, Pam, that you want to add to any big ones
in
that they
Kentucky,
found?
Tennessee, not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
I have one I want to talk about, but not yet.
Well, go ahead because I'm about done. Listen,
Yeah,
because I have bigger.
I'm moving over
pretty
to
late.
Utah, Texas.
Go
area.
for it. I have bigger fish to fry, so I'm done with
Okay.
that part. So I'm going to let you run with what you got.
Okay, cool. So I have this book. It's called Weird America. It's by Jim Brandon. I've had it forever. And I ran across a reference to it in regards to research for giants. So I pulled it up to see what it was talking about. And this particular story comes out of Texas, the Glen Rose area, which is like 24 miles north of Meridian. Giant humanoid footprints have been reported intermixed with reptile tracks of 135 million years ago along the Paluxy riverbeds west of here in and near Dinosaur Valley State Park. In at least one case, a human print clearly overlapped a dinosaur track, suggesting that the two must have been made at the same time when the present rock was still in the form of mud. Orthodox paleontologists are with the dinosaur tracks because dinosaurs are still very much in, and these were the very first sauropod tracks found anywhere. But they want no part of the human prints because that would mean rejiggering too many theories. Sound familiar? So they accept the reptile marks, but they reject the human ones as man-made by Indians, practical jokers, by local people trying for a tourist attraction, you name it. This doublespeak only makes the experts look bad, however, because it shows their lack of familiarity with the area. There are not just one or two conspicuous and laboriously carved phony tracks, but at least 3 long trails of them, and they rise and fall from sight periodically as the river ebbs and floods and rearranges the silt of its bed. In July 1976, Bigfoot hunter John Green, which he's huge, studied the site in association with Jack Walber, professor of geology at Texas Christian University. With great labor and the use of dikes and a powerful pump, they were able to expose a number of the normally submerged footprints, both reptilian and human. The latter were 18 inches long, and they were 5 to 7 inches wide. 18-inch long foot. That is like huge. You know, you got the fish and it's that big kind of thing. I looked at the inches for shoe sizes, and that would run about a 32, 34 size shoe. That's and like a quadruple E, something like that. Just huge. Green found that some of the tracks had a very pronounced ridges around them where the original mud was pushed up as the foot sank in. He reasoned that this eliminated the possibility of the tracks either being fakes or accidental products of erosion, since it would have been necessary to cut down the surrounding rock for a considerable area to leave the ridge around the impressions. Most of these tracks were found in the vicinity of Dinosaur Valley State Park, about 5 miles west of Glen Rose.
That's crazy.
Cool. So, you know, and I did run across some other references to dinosaur pictographs with some of this, which was pretty interesting.
When you said you were like talking about the size of the feet, all I could think of was like the monster from Looney Tunes that has the giant tennis shoes.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about
that runs like that's all I could think of.
Kind of be like that, man.
Yeah.
I knew a guy with like size 19 shoes, and they were humongous.
Yeah,
I could almost put my shoes in his shoes.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
That would be almost double the size of his feet, close to double the size.
Yeah, close to it.
Wow, I bet his Mr. Scholl's inserts were expensive.
Well, at the time, he was driving to Texas once a year to buy shoes because it's the only place he could get them off the shelf.
I was actually talking about the giant, but I'm sure his were too.
I'm sure he had to drive quite a ways to find shoes.
Yeah.
Why his feet are bare.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
And honestly, this other one that I found, it's out of Utah, out of Antelope Springs. And I kind of wish I would have ran across this when we were doing more of last week's show, because this isn't really so much giants as it is just incredible. Dr. Helmut Doling of Utah Geological Survey, he was working with this other guy named Ottinger, and I'll skip a bunch of this, but it comes down to this guy's named Lynn Ottinger. He was picking over an area where they found pieces of brownish bone and teeth. So they knew when they found that they needed to stop, because anything they found would not be verified unless it was, properly excavated. Mm-hmm. So he stopped digging immediately. And once he realized these bones that he found, they were in situ in semi rock of incalculable age, and that for the find to be scientifically acceptable, needed to be done under strict supervision. So going on down here a little bit, they uncovered the lower halves of 2 human skeletons. The bones were articulated, which means they were laid out in natural configuration, showing that the bodies were intact when covered by soil, and that the bones had not fallen or been washed into the stratum from some higher or newer level. A number of other technical factors indicated that the bones were as old as the stratum in which they lay. The age of the level of the stratum they found these bones in, 100 million years.
Wow.
100 million years of either the lower Dakota or even the older upper Morrison formations. But as Marwood observed at the site, the bones appeared to be quite modern in configuration, not ancient, half simian, but Homo sapiens. This was what I was referring to earlier when I was struggling with my words, was this particular article that I found. And it goes on to say that as far as anything, that's as far as anything ever went. If any carbon-14 or any other age testing was ever done, no one would admit to it. Professor Marwitz suddenly became disinterested in the subject and became very hard to reach. Not long afterward, he left Utah completely, taking a job in a college out east. A year later, Ottinger gave up and recovered the box of bones still untested. So somebody got paid off.
Wow.
But you drop this, we're going to give you a cushy job.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
100%. That's what that was. But yeah, no, I thought that was interesting.
Follow the money.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
It might be worth seeing where he's at now. And you guys want to know the funnest part of where it led me to find this information? Good old Reader's Digest, Mysteries of the Unexplained, that everybody grew up on
Awesome.
back in the 70s. I was so
Ain't
excited
nothing wrong
to
with that.
actually get to use it.
Nothing wrong with that.
Other resources in.
I still find Leonard Nimoy's In Search Of valuable.
Awesome.
I am not
Yes.
going to lie.
Hey, if it
That's
was
so
well written, it's still worth your time.
It is. It
I'll
is.
tell you what, guys. I want to make a road trip to Dinosaur Valley Park. I've always
That'd be
wanted to go
cool.
there, and now I really want to go there.
We need to put that on our road trip
On a road
list.
trip list. Yes, we
Yep.
do.
All right.
just-
So
Great
you have
idea.
Just start
you have
scheduling
any-
3 weeks every summer to go road tripping.
That would be
Yeah,
fun.
we do. It would be fun.
Yeah.
Those were my
Did you-
biggies, Jess.
Your
if you wanna-
biggies? All
if
right.
you
Well, since
go
we're
on
on the whole payoff, things aren't getting where they need to go, hoot nanny, I'm going to go ahead and stick my foot in the water here. And
All right.
we're going to talk about Smithsonian cover-up. All right?
And
Because
we're going to wrap with that.
the Smithsonian is at the heart of this problem, the fact that none of the giants have ever been recognized as anything. So we're just going to hop into it. So I was doing a little research and I found out that all of this goes back to a man by John Wesley Powell. 1879, he was appointed the Smithsonian director of Indian Affairs and some other stuff. It had other names at the time, but basically Indian Affairs and entomology. And he laid down the rules that the Smithsonian would follow when allowing pieces into the museum collection, what they would deign to look at, and what they would say was real, was not, or what was worth their time. And this right here is where it all goes down at. Now, earlier in the show here, they were talking about the book, The Ancient Giants Who Ruled America. The second part of that title is The Missing Skeletons in the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up. This book was written by Richard Dewhurst, and I do suggest, like Pam say, that you go and you get it.
And he's a
It is
journalist.
available. Yes,
It's
it is
good.
available on Kindle. It has a fantastic array of old articles and things like that, original articles about these skeletons and stuff. But he also lays out whenever the Smithsonian sticks their noses in and makes a botch of everything. But he also gives a very good history on this Powell fellow. And he took some information right from the papers that this Powell guy wrote originally that have become the manifesto for the Smithsonian. I will let you know this was all written back in the 1800s, and the Smithsonian still holds to this today. Now, any institution worth their clout, I wouldn't think would hold on to a manifesto that was that old. Things should change and evolve
about
over time as things
reputation.
are discovered. Yeah, but it does not. So I'm gonna read a little bit and just kind of give you guys a handle on what the Smithsonian actually thinks of the Native Americans and any indigenous peoples. It's pretty nasty.
Not necessarily
So-
as individuals, but
Mhm.
Yeah. So the title of Powell's very first report, which became their manifesto to the Secretary of the Smithsonian in 1879 was called On Limitations to the Use of Some Anthropological Data. Now, if you'll check the show notes afterwards on Facebook, you're going to find a link to that. However, you can find it free everywhere. If you just look up that title with Powell on the end of it, you can find it for free on Google Books. You can find it on all sorts of places. Go and look it up. It's worth your time to read. Go to just his articles, because a lot of men wrote different articles for this. Just go to his, and you're going to get a very good idea of where the Smithsonian is based. Let me pull out his stuff. So, investigations in this department are of great interest and have attracted to the field a host of workers, but a general review of the mass of published matter exhibits the fact that the uses to which the material have been put have not always been wise. So he's saying basically, some of the stuff you guys have been paying attention to before really doesn't need to be paid attention to. And he's talking about American Indian wise. In the monuments of antiquity found throughout North America in camp and village sites, graves, mounds, ruins, and scattered works of art, the origin and development of art in savage and barbaric life may be satisfactorily studied. Incidentally, too, hints of customs may be discovered, but outside of this, the discoveries made have often been illegitimately used, especially for the purpose of connecting the tribes of North America with peoples of so-called races of antiquity in other portions of the world. Right?
We've already proven Vikings have been here. We've already proven the Irish have been here.
Mm-hmm. A brief review of these, of some of these conclusions that must be accepted in the present status of the science will exhibit the futility of these attempts. In the study of these antiquities, there has been much unnecessary speculation in respect to the relation existing between the people to whose existence they attest, and the tribes of Indians inhabiting the country during the historic period. It may be said that in the pueblos discovered in the southwestern portion of the United States and further south through Mexico and perhaps into Central America, tribes are known having a culture quite as far advanced as any exhibited in the discovered ruins. In this respect, then, there is no need to search for extraliminal origin through lost tribes for any art they're exhibited. So they're saying it's not really worth it to go check out.
We already know all there is to know. We don't need to know anymore.
Pay no attention.
Yeah. With regard to the mounds so widely scattered between the two oceans, it may also be said that mound building tribes were known in the early history of discovery of this continent, and that the vestiges of art discovered do not excel in any respect the arts of the Indian tribes known to history. There is, therefore, no reason for us to search for an extraliminal origin through lost tribes for the arts discovered in the mounds in North America. So he's saying what they found there has already been seen, and it's stupid. So we're not going to go there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, this one's one of my favorites. Okay, so this is, just to let you know, Powell was big on evolution and nothing else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to push this. We are shown charts of man becoming bipedal, and each new man being bigger and smarter than the last. This is in direct contradiction to the charts we use for every other animal we study. We have only to look at a bird and be told that it was once a dinosaur to know how false this paradigm of man's growth is. Look at the evolution of most animals, and the record says they got smaller over time, not bigger. However, with all the modern edifices of education built on the theory of evolution and the growing stature of humanity, we can't very well have the Smithsonian running around telling people that we have degenerated from an ancient race of giants who once ruled America.
So he basically admits it right there and says, but we can't have that.
That's right, because it's evolution, and that doesn't make sense. So we're not going to pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make us look good.
Yes. A couple of the other things denoted here. He also holds true to uniform gradual history, and for use of the for anyone who does not know what that is, it basically says that there's benign parts of history where no cataclysms or anything happens for huge spans of time on the earth, which we all know is not true.
We can prove
Right?
that is untrue. Yes.
Yes. So therein lies where they could poo-poo the Great Flood. It never happened. Because
we
that
know
was a
it happened.
benign part. We do know what happened, but the Smithsonian still to this day says that there's actual no proof for a worldwide flood.
And that's insane. That's
It is
absolutely
insane. Yeah.
God, these
Okay.
people.
So the third one that he really held true to was the land bridge theory, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so and I'm going to read from the author's point of view right here. I'm not going to go into because his actual writing on it is so long-winded and antiquated. It's really hard to follow to our ears now. So I'm going to read the author's version. So he says, the third major contributing factor to the extent historical myopia is the land bridge theory, which states that all the Indian tribes reached America from Asia across the Alaskan land bridge. The man who came up with this absurd and unprovable theory is none other than Dr. Ailes Hrdlicka, the first curator in 1903 of physical anthropology of the U.S. National Museum, now the Smithsonian Institution, National Museum of Natural History. No boats for him. They walked. Even though we know they would have had to walk around or through the extensive glaciers that are still blocking Canada to this day. Were they not capable of slowly sailing from one island to another, as we know the Polynesians and the Australians did for 40,000 years? The theory is absurd, but the Smithsonian told us to believe it, and so we did. When academics got caught in such a perfect storm of wrong theories, they have had a very hard time wriggling out of it. Reputations and careers are at stake. Books have been written and published, and promotions garnered on the weight of their veracity. So the fix was in from the beginning, so to speak.
Mhm.
Yep.
Then
I read
there
that.
is the thorny question of racism and manifest destiny, which indeed reads like this. America is inhabited by inferior races of people whom civilized man has a God-given right to exterminate so that he can exploit the country he now considers his domain. One has only to read Powell's 1879 theories about the Aborigines and their inherent lack of intelligence to get an unpleasant whiff of what we are dealing with here. Powell finishes his proof of no European or Asiatic influences by boldly asserting, without a shred of supporting evidence, that all pictographic writing found anywhere in the Americas is evidence of nothing more than the most rudimentary picture making, despite having no working knowledge of any of the ancient writing systems to which he alludes. And it continues on, but we're going to skip through
The
a little bit.
hubris of this man.
What a jerk. What an absolute
Yeah, and
jerk.
he's basically being a bigoted.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to see racism right there, there's racism right there.
Flat.
Yeah, it gets
flat out.
Yes, it gets worse. I'm not going to read Powell's own description of all of this because, like I said before, it's very antiquated and long-winded, and we don't have the time or the brain power to go through it all. I, however, am going to read the very end of that section because I was so hopping mad when I read it. I really wanted to punch a wall. Mm-hmm. So he's gone on this long diatribe, and he says, hence, it will be seen that it is illegitimate to use any pictographic matter of a date anterior to the discovery of the continent by Columbus for all historic purposes. Now, here we go, people. This is where stuff starts to fall apart. And I've said before, the Smithsonian still holds this as their manifesto. You can actually read it when you walk into their main building. It's what they hold as their route to allow stuff in. They do not include anything from before the time that Columbus came across. Anything found before that is crap to them. And so they will never accept anything in unless it's on their own terms. It's something of their own that they feel that they can, that pushes their narrative. How sad is that?
It is. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible.
So we're going to go on a little further. I'm going to toss another dude into the mix now. So we're going to move beyond Powell too. And that Hendricki guy or whatever. It is bad enough that these biased and unsupported claims were the policy of the Smithsonian in the 19th century. But to make matters worse, Charles Doolittle Walcott, Secretary, Chief Executive Officer of the Smithsonian from 1907 to 1927, made the Powell the doctrine. So he was the asshole who decided this work was so fantastic that it should be what the Smithsonian, what rules over the Smithsonian completely. So he's the dude that did it. He made it the official dogma of the museum for the entire 20th century as well. In fact, the Powell Doctrine is still the official policy of the Smithsonian as of this writing, despite the fact that some scholars associated with the museum are finally starting to speak out in support of evidence of early European settlements of the Americas.
And now, as of this writing, the copyright is 2014.
Yes. And you'd think that if something big had changed at the Smithsonian, everyone would have heard about it.
We would have heard about it, yeah.
Yeah.
You would think. Unless they've done it so quietly so they don't make themselves look bad. Mm-hmm. Because it's all about image.
Yep. So finishing up here on this, the great crime and tragedy of this policy is hard to compute. One glaring result has been the suppression of hundreds of out-of-context finds, so out-of-place artifacts, all submitted to the museum in naive ignorance of the museum's official policy of suppression of all alternative perspectives. To compound the problem, and this one sucks balls too, okay? Mm-hmm. All major universities in the U.S. all adopted this policy in conjunction with the official position of the Smithsonian, thus making it impossible to study alternative American history and receive any grants or funding for pursuits of this nature. A giant problem for the giants and a giant problem for our history. So the Smithsonian has made it impossible. Now, just for funsies, and I'm going to turn off my ring light real quick so you guys can see this. It's going to get a little dark. I pulled up the pictures of those three assholes so you can all see what they looked like. So you have a picture to hate. So this is John Wesley Powell.
Oh, he's a peach.
He looks very angry in that picture.
He should be, because I really want to, hate him. Okay. So we've got, let me find his name again. It's so weird. He is actually not even from the U.S. He came over to mess with us is what he did. He was like, I'm not happy in my own country. I'm going to go mess up the U.S. How about that? Dr. Ailes Hardlicka. He was the first curator, and he was a big fan of all of that anti-Indian crap.
Mm.
He looks very angry also.
Yes, he does. And then we have Charles Doolittle Walcott, the flaming asshole who made everything possible and made sure it was the doctrine. So there you go. Let me see if we can get it out of that light.
If we get pulled from YouTube, I'll put it on. This will be on Rumble so everybody can watch it.
Okay, yeah. Now you all have a face to go with the hate and the anger and the angst you have going on right now. I know I do.
It is upsetting.
It is.
Such racism would be.
It is. But I
condoned, let alone embraced in this day and age.
Yes.
Where are all the statue burner or destroyers now when there's actual racism to be? They're pulling down statues of people who had nothing to do with racism. Why are they letting the Smithsonian get away with this crap?
Because nobody knows they're doing it. It's not common knowledge.
It's
not. A lot of people know, I'm sure. It
sadly enough, and the thing is it's right there for anybody to read. if anybody took the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know. I've been to the Smithsonian, to the Natural Museum of History, and I loved it. I thought it was really cool. Little did I know that
They
how
only
much,
show their point of view.
yes, how much cooler it should be, but it's
Yeah.
not.
That's sad.
So I do
It is
have a
sad.
little bit of something to make everybody feel just a little bit happier. So apparently just a few years ago, they had a big, huge anniversary for Powell. Because besides being in charge of the Department of the Smithsonian, before that, he was a supposed great explorer of the West. And it was he went through and journaled all of his exploits with the Indians, and he mapped the Grand Canyon. And he was just, he was this fantastic explorer. That's how he got the gig at the Smithsonian, because they thought, man, this dude's a badass. Let's bring him in. Well, a number of years ago, they had this big, huge history on him, and some of the scientists got in on it and wrote their papers on him. And a lot of them were not pretty. And I'm going to
Awesome.
kind of touch on this one that I found, because this chick rocks. So her name is Tamara Pico. She has a PhD, and she writes for the Scientific American. And you can find this online.
So academia isn't all bad.
No.
And in fact, I would hint by her name. I believe she probably has a little Indian tucked in there. So she had a little reason to write this up too. But she brought some facts to life that a lot of people may not know or have the wherewithal to go and look up. So I'm just going to go over a couple of these. It's pretty great stuff. So Powell published the first report of his explorations in 1870 in a travel book entitled New Tracks in North America, which contained a compilation of stories about adventures in the West. Blah, 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 blah. William Bell explains in the preface that the explorations are especially necessary to produce knowledge about Western North America. So these were unexplored places. He was kind of like the first one out there. Let's see what we got going on. Is the land worth anything? Indian tribes, what's out here? Because this country contains cradles for nations which are destined to spring from our own hardy and prolific stock. Right? This language was common in 19th century research in geology and geography, which connected physical landscapes and climates to human race characteristics. Scientists argued that certain topographies and climates produced humans who could not rise from a grade of savagery and were destined to be developed by the civilized races, even suggesting that North America was especially well suited for the institution of slavery.
Of course, they wanted the land.
Yeah, so let me put that in layman's terms for everybody. They just said there's certain places that get too hot and arid for anybody to be smart there. It just doesn't let their brain get smart. And so it's best to use them for workhorses. That's about all they're worth, is what they're saying there. Despite Powell's later interest in ethnographic studies, during his first expedition down the Colorado in 1869, he made remarkably few notes in his diary about the presence of ruins or ancient or recent Native American camps. In fact, over 250 archaeological sites have been found in the region of the 1869 expedition. 37 of them directly on the path that Powell took.
So
he
they
wasn't
weren't
even
worth
writing
him mentioning, because
Uh-huh.
you can't have smart people who are.
Yeah. In fact, it states that later on, not that long after him, another group of explorers went through there and marked all those where he did not. Basically, it says invariably Powell skewed his narrative of his expedition to appear more uncharted than it truly was. So he was trying to make it look good, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So he's talking, he's telling the Indian this, so he's talking to some of them. I tell them that all the great and good white men are anxious to know quite many things, that they spend much time in learning, and that the greatest man is he who knows the most, that the white men want to know all about the mountains and the valleys and the rivers and the canyons. Right?
It's like he's chucking children.
Yeah, exactly.
That is
Basic-
insulting.
Mhm,
Yes.
very.
That is insulting to me, and I'm not even.
Yes. Basically, by leaving out all the Indian tribes, by saying it's basically empty, and by mapping topography and possessing just the knowledge of the landscapes, Powell could make the Colorado River legible to the U.S. government as capital to be owned and exploited.
Mhm.
So he didn't want them to know about all the Indian groups there. And if, when they did show up, we could just move them the hell out of the way or whatever.
Yeah,
I
if
got
you-
no
if you
use for
admit that there's-
racists.
if
I
you
want to
admit
punch
that
this
there's a
guy. He
rich-
ain't even alive anymore.
If you admit there's a rich culture there, then how are you going to convince people that we need to take over and move them out or get rid of them?
I know. So Powell published extensive anthropological studies on Native people and language, including the Ute people inhabiting these canyon lands, seeking to provide evidence for the inferior status of the Native American culture and expounding a stepping stone between barbarism and civilization. In a report to the U.S. government entitled On the Condition of the Ute Indians of Utah, Powell proposed, next to teaching them to work, the most important thing is to teach them the English language. Into their own language, there is woven so much mythology and sorcery that the ideas and thoughts of civilized life cannot be communicated to them in their own language.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Dang.
Advocating for government
This
funding
is
to
the
be
definition
used.
of hubris.
Yes. Advocating for government funding to be used to civilize Native American populations, Powell pushed for the teaching of English, Christianity, and Western methods of farming and manufacture. The study of ethnology was used as a tool for scientists to demarcate social categories in order to justify government-sponsored programs that exploited newly adopted land and its inhabitants.
So
He was in
basically,
charge of all of that through the Smithsonian, and it was solely to be used to get the Indians the hell out of there, not the other way
and so he
around.
basically
was.
shaped poor American policy in regards to the Americans or the American
Yes.
Indians.
To all
This guy's a
of-
monster. He's
to
not.
all
he's
of the
not a-
American Indians in the continental US right now, especially the ones that are still stuck on the reservations, you have this man to thank.
Mhm.
I think it's time for everybody to take a step back and represent his name the way it should be.
that's
Not
awful.
as an American hero. He's not a hero.
And the
No,
Scientific
he was a-
American is a very well-known and
Respected.
respected publication. You don't write for them if you're a hack.
No,
That's
you
right.
do not.
So this lady seems to know what she's talking about.
Yes.
She does.
And she's gonna leave us with one more little tidbit for all of us to chew on, and I'm sure this one's gonna make you extra happy.
Oh, I'm already
So-
really happy.
Yeah, this one's good though. Origin stories such as Powell's expedition to the Grand Canyon 150 years ago are told in introductory earth science classes and are instrumental in setting cultural norms in our geology classes. This culture can powerfully determine who feels a sense of belonging in the classroom or in a career as a geologist. Powell, among other early American geologists, furthered anthropologic research invested in the racial inferiority of the Native Americans and was motivated by military imperialism.
Wow.
Yep.
That should be enough to make even skeptics think twice. Because,
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, and to stop and think, it's one thing to say, oh, there's this huge conspiracy about the Smithsonian. It's not a conspiracy. It's outlined right here in more than one reference, in more than one place.
in their own documents.
In their own documents, 100% in their own documents. And by others, by PhDs that are saying, yeah, this is exactly what he said. This is exactly what's been put forth. And this is exactly their point of view and the way that they withhold all of their findings and all of their presentations to everyone to this day. And it's horrible.
It is horrible. Yeah. So anybody can go look it up. Go look up his writings, that original writing that the Smithsonian took as their doctor. Anybody can read it. You can also go to the Smithsonian site and kind of look up their little writings, their original writings on who they were as a group, what their expectations were and stuff. And they say out loud, we are of isolation doctrine. And anybody who doesn't know what that means, so there's isolationists and there's diffusionists. And isolationists are very into the US and the continents themselves were very isolated. They kept to themselves. They couldn't travel. Everything that they had trade-wise was within their own communities. Nothing came or went anywhere. And the diffusionism believers are the ones like us who believe that, of course, they all did trade, and of course they moved out, and of course the Indians could leave and come back, and of course the Egyptians came in here, and of course the Norse were here.
Yes, and that's why you see the type of things from culture to culture. It's not because it just came to their idea, their idea just came to them. It's because it was shared between communities and ethnic groups and different countries, even back into antiquity.
Well, I say this more on the other podcast, but I'll say it on this one. My challenge to all of our listeners and all of our viewers is to go out and do your own research.
100%. 100%.
Make up your mind. Look at what's has gone on in the past.
You can see we've put our reference materials in. Chris has put them up on the Facebook page, so you can see what we refer to in this. But if you want to get into a really good deep dive, Astonishing Legends, and I put this in reference too. They actually did a 3-part series on it called The Tall Ones back in 2018. And I think it's episodes, it's like 96, 97, and 98. But if you want to really get into it, they have this entire legion called the Astonishing Legends Corps that do all their research, and they're like anthropologists and different things. So they've got really learned people bringing their material to them that they produce. So I would highly recommend that you go check them out too, because there's no way, we barely scratched the surface on this.
We barely touched this.
Yeah, I'm not even done, and I know we have to kind of finish up here because we're hitting the 2-hour mark. But really quick, just to kind of pique everybody's interest. So I was looking into DeSoto and his ravage that he took through the Americas and back down again, and a lot of people know, but some people don't know. So he ran into a tribe who had a very giant chief called Tuscaloosa. He was said to be about 8.5 feet tall. They said when he rode on a horse, he had to lift his feet sometimes because it would touch the ground. That's how tall he was.
Wow.
Right. And I thought that was interesting. Another giant, and he was a chief, which kind of makes sense because you see a lot of these giants.
Spanish documented him.
Exactly. He's documented. But here's where it gets fun. So he wore a very large cape of feathers. And I thought, that sounds familiar. So I went back through my research and I found there were several other giants, the mummified ones, that had feather capes. Right.
So it makes me wonder if.
Interesting.
I'm not done. No. Don't go there yet. So I keep looking back. Guess who else also wore feathered capes? The Nephilim.
Nice.
Gets even better. So I'm following this path, right? And I have all this information. So if we ever want to do a show on it, we totally can. So you follow the Nephilim down, and it goes into Atlantis through the Greek mythologies. So the Titans got thrown out because they warred with Zeus and they lost. The Titans got thrown out. They spread out and became the Atlantis people. Part of them came into the U.S. They still wore their feather capes. They spread out. They came down. And I went back to the Annals of Kentucky. It talks about them, and we didn't even think about it. So
that's what started this whole thing.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So here we go. And this is out of the Annals of Kentucky, page 18. During the decline of the Atlans, some fled to the Anahuac in South America, where they founded new empires, or civilized many nations, such as the Kaluans, the Anahuac, and the Masis, the Piroways, the Kalos, the Tiahuanacus, and Kojas of the South America, who ascribed their ancient civilization to white, bearded strangers. Thus, the ancient arts and sciences of North America were transferred to the South. So I thought, maybe I should travel down to South America and see what's there, right? So the first one I look up are the Incas. I find Pachacuti, the 9th Inca ruler, who also wore, guess what?
Feathered cape.
A feathered cape. In fact, I have a picture of it here in a minute. I can show you.
Oh, nice.
When he came into office, there was a sudden superiority to the Inca nation. He completely fixed their infrastructure. He gave them full waterworks, plumbing, sewage, aquifers, farming, government, trading, etc. He founded Machu Picchu within the year, right? They called him the son of the sun, as in the sun above us. Now remember, the Nephilim and the giants were all sun worshippers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He is often linked to the origins and the expansion of the sun cults through the North America or the South Americas. Also, he was called the reverser of the world and the earth shaker because he was so damn big.
Awesome.
Right?
They call me that,
Um,
but it's not because of.
Now, let me turn this
If you
off
break out the
again.
feathered cape, Mark.
I mean,
I'm going to show you this.
I didn't get tall, I got wide.
So this is the statue they have of him there, right?
Nice.
And let's pull up. It's hard to see the cape, but you can see right on the edge of it there.
The feathers.
It's all feathers. And he look at the feathers on his cap. He has that Indian tribal, right? So I'm like, is he the only one, or can you find it in every culture? Right? So I'm looking around in one of my books, and I decided I'm going to look up feather cape and see if anything comes through it. And the first thing it pulled up was Quetzalcoatl, who Graham Hancock was talking about in that show we were watching. Yep. Right?
Yes.
And what I found was Montezuma's speech that he gave to Cortez when Cortez came to take over, and he had him befuddled thinking that, he was going to be their savior. And this is Montezuma's speech saying why he thinks Cortez is his, savior. Lord of the Seven Caves of Navgar and the lawful sovereign of the seven nations that gave rise to the Mexican Empire. From the tradition he left these countries to conquer new regions, and he's talking about Quetzalcoatl, in the East, with a promise that in the process of time, his descendants would return to new model our laws and reform government. So what he's saying is, hey, this big, tall, white dude came here earlier and helped us set up this colony. And then he left and said he'd be back, and he was going to send his descendants with him to help us set up our government and our, and our laws and fix everything. And we were just waiting for him to show up. And he looks so much like you, Mr. White Dude with the beard, that it must be you, right? Cortez was fully aware that Montezuma and the Aztec nation and all of the other tribes of New Spain, because that's what they called it at the time, held him in awe because he resembled a god who had arrived with his followers on a boat that had come from the rising sun. He had brought civilization to Anahuac. His homeland was known as Telapalan, the Red Land, and it was to here that he departed after his ministry. The name Quetzalcoatl derives from two words, quetzal, feathered and plumed, and Codal, which means snake. In his earthly form, he was said to be very tall in stature, long hair and flowing beard, and had white skin.
European.
So that's Toltec, right? And it goes on. I found this today, so I could not really do like a huge deep dive into all of the South American nations. I did look into the Tiwanaku area. That's not its own settlement. It was a lot of settlements that didn't have really like a ruling king. But Tiwanaku overnight at that same time suddenly became rich in farming. They suddenly understood government better. They started setting up villages instead of being so spread out. They started bringing in waterworks. And they suddenly started worshiping the sun god instead of the ones they had previous. So you see this trickling down through. So if you go back to the Annals of Kentucky and all those Indians talking about, oh, we ran them off, and they started heading down and being chiefs of other crazy places. So what if those white giants are the leftover Nephilim, the Atlantans?
Very well could be. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Good one.
Yeah. So yeah,
That's
if
cool.
you go back and look at some of those findings, especially where the mummies, of course, they didn't find them with the burials, because how would you find feathers that had been buried
Right.
for thousands of years? But the mummified ones, they often talk about these feather plumes, especially up here on their shoulders or capes. Yep. Pretty
Cool.
exciting. I
It is.
know.
Really cool.
I freaked out. So that may be like a show in the future, like to go ahead and travel down that way and see
Yeah.
what we
I
can
mean,
find.
I'd like to revisit this or continue with this, and I don't know if it's going to be anytime soon, but it's been an eye opener. There's been some interesting things going on, and we've been slamming the Smithsonian for a while.
So this is a drawing from a carving of Quetzalcoatl, and you can see his feathered cape.
Yep, sure can.
Yep, and headdress.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Yep, sure
and
enough.
very American Indian looking.
Good catch, Jess.
Yeah,
right there.
That's
it was just,
awesome.
I wish you guys could have been here, because I literally found that by accident and thought, I'm just going to pick a tribe and just go look up their history. And if I can find anybody that's giant or white or, in it, and just right away. And I was like, well, where's a picture of him? And I looked at it and was like, shit.
There he is.
There it is.
And
then
it
I
looks
was
very
like,
North American.
well, let's move over to this tribe and let me look. Oh, there's one with feathers. Is there a picture? Yes, there is. Holy shit, he's got the feathers. And I was just like, this is too much. It's one of those, it was like last week, I had to stop, because if I continued, I'd be pulling out my hair right now and be covered in papers. So
I am anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
just be worse.
Yeah.
It's time for me to turn into a pumpkin. So it's about that time.
Thank you for letting us be on again and tell all
I
the craziness.
appreciate you guys coming on. I wish Phil could have been on here, because he has been wanting to talk about, and I'd like to talk about the Anunnaki another time.
That'd be a great one.
So we could do a whole show on like Anunnaki and Nephilim and go down into the Americas and see how they influence down there. That would be a cool show.
It would be.
We'll have to check that out. But folks, I hope you guys have enjoyed the show. I've enjoyed having my sisters,
Yay,
Sam and Jess.
Yay!
As always, it was awesome. We covered stuff that some of it I knew, some of it I had no clue. It's just awesome. So with that being said, I hope everybody has a great Wednesday night, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Let's see if I'm smart enough to run the computer. All right.